It was a Saturday night, and I had a pit in my stomach that bourbon couldn't touch. My wife, Evelyn, had asked, no, insisted I join her for dinner with her usual crowd. Just once this month, she'd said with that rehearsed smile. Like it was some kind of favor she was granting me. This wasn't new. Every few weeks, she had these dinners with her high society friends. I'd dodged the last couple, but this time, I ran out of excuses. She caught me off guard, so I got dressed, shirt pressed, collar stiff, my best loafers. Still, I knew how this would go. I always felt like I was tagging along to a club that never wanted me in the first place. I didn't need them to say it out loud. They wore it on their sleeves, like my presence was tolerated, not welcomed. I looked at Evelyn as we pulled into the valet circle. She gave me that same smile, gentle, forced. Just be yourself, she said. I almost laughed. Myself never fit in there, not once. The steakhouse was the kind of place that whispered money, subtle but loud if you were listening, chandeliers like upside-down waterfalls, leather-bound menus thicker than my wrist. A host with a jawline carved from marble led us past shelves of vintage scotch and aged Wagyu on display like museum pieces. They were already there. 5 couples, all looking like a magazine ad for old money. Laughter, clinking glasses, the smell of exclusivity. Ah, there he is, one of the guys said as I approached. Did you find parking okay, or did you take the bus? A few chuckles. I smiled like it didn't land. Evelyn's hands stiffened on my arm. I sat down, ordered a beer. The table quieted. Wine glasses everywhere. Someone asked about the new Bordeaux at a vineyard in Napa. I nodded, not pretending to care. Evelyn winced when my beer came. He's a simple guy, she said, brushing it off. Just loud enough for the table to hear, soft enough to pretend she didn't mean anything by it. She leaned away slightly when she spoke, cut me off once when I answered a question about home repairs, like even my knowledge had a ceiling here. Then came the spark. They were talking about an art exhibit in New York. One woman gushed about a sculpture made of bent copper that looked like emotion frozen in time. Another piped up, we should do a Tuscany trip in the fall, but just the elegant bunch, right? More laughter. Evelyn included. I tried to smile. What's considered elegant these days? Silence. Then Evelyn laughed. Awkward, but real. You know, some people just don't fit that world. That one landed, quietly, hard. I nodded slowly, took a sip of my beer. Let the bitterness coat more than just my tongue. It wasn't the first time. I thought about our wedding. Her family frowned at my suit, plain, rented. Her dad once asked if I needed help affording a tie. Back then, I brushed it off. Love would smooth the edges. Or so I thought. Then there was the time I fixed her parents' AC unit, and her mother thanked me like I was a contractor. It wasn't just tonight, it was a pattern. It was how they saw me. I wasn't her equal. I was the lucky guy she picked from the clearance rack of life. Some people just don't fit that world. She said it like it was a joke, like I wasn't supposed to hear. But I did. And I remembered everything that came before it. After dinner, we lingered over drinks. One of the guys, Paul, I think, waved a whiskey menu in front of me and said, or do you want to see the beer list again? Another round of laughs. Evelyn didn't defend me. She doubled down. He's fine. He doesn't like fancy stuff anyway. I clenched my jaw, let it pass. Then she told a story, our honeymoon in Maine. But she changed it, said we stayed in a villa. It was a roadside inn. Said we ate truffle pasta. It was clam chowder. I looked at her like she was a stranger. I waited until they were all laughing again. Then I stood. Restroom, I said. I walked past the bar, past the host stand, right out the front doors. The air hit cold against my skin. I stood there for a moment, watching the valet jog to fetch a car for a woman wrapped in fox fur. That was the moment. Right then, I didn't need to belong in their world. I could buy it. Sunday mornings used to feel like something. Quiet, still, a fresh page. That morning, though, it was just another reminder that silence can cut deeper than words. I was up early, made coffee the same way I always do. French press, 3 scoops, let it steep. Evelyn was already at the kitchen island, scrolling through her phone like the night before hadn't happened. Not a glance in my direction, no mention of the dinner, no "you okay" or even a half-hearted excuse. Instead, she sipped from her mug and said flatly, "Don't forget we have the Wilkinsons' brunch next week." I nodded, didn't trust myself to speak yet. She held up one foot, showing off new shoes, pointed, white, designer. They were on sale, she said, like that was the part I'd care about. She didn't ask why I left dinner early, didn't even notice, maybe, or worse, she did and didn't care. I took my coffee and went outside, sat on the porch steps and watched a squirrel tear into a flower pot. I envied its freedom, its ability to just dig up what it needed and move on. No performance, no social games. My mind drifted, not far, just back. When we first met, Evelyn used to say she loved that I was real, that I wasn't like the polished type she grew up around. I worked with my hands, knew how to change a tire, thought cashmere was itchy. She found it charming at first. Her friends joked that she'd found a project, something to sand down, paint over, show off. Back then, I laughed along. I didn't see the undertone. I do now. It wasn't love for who I was. It was pride in what she could make me into. Over the years, it crept in slowly. She started picking out my shirts, then ties, suggested I speak less at her events. Not everyone needs to hear your toolbox stories, she'd say, half smiling. At some point, I stopped noticing the pieces of me that were being shaved off. I became a version of me that fit her gallery. That morning, still outside, I heard her call from the kitchen. "Can you come in a sec?" I walked in. She handed me a glossy card, invitation to a fundraiser for the local art museum. "They're expecting a strong turnout," she said, then added, "Try to wear something upscale this time." I looked at her calm. "Do I embarrass you?" She laughed, short, clipped. "Don't be dramatic." I didn't say another word, just folded the invitation in half, placed it on the counter. Neat, quiet. I was done guessing what she meant. I'd started listening to what she didn't say. Later, she left to meet her sister, said they had errands to run. I stayed behind, wandered into the walk-in closet. Her section took up 3/4 of the space, color-coded, labeled. Mine was tucked into a corner. Everything there had been chosen by her over the last couple of years. Brooks Brothers tags, crisp collars, all gifts. My old stuff, gone. She once gave my boots to Goodwill without asking. "You're too handsome to look so local," she said that day, folding the boots into a donation bag. I stared at the closet. Not a single thing in there felt like mine anymore. I looked in the mirror. Who was this man? Tailored, tucked, and tamed. A curated version of someone who used to laugh with his mouth wide open, who used to build things, fix things, tear things apart just to see how they worked. I said it to myself, out loud. Elegance isn't fabric, it's freedom. Evening fell. Evelyn left again, this time for some networking event. I didn't ask what for, didn't care. The moment she backed out of the driveway, I walked into the office and opened my laptop. There was a place I used to drive by, an old social club from the 50s, abandoned now. A historic building with bones still solid, even if the paint was flaking. I'd always wondered who it used to belong to, what kind of deals were made in those rooms. Out of curiosity, or maybe something deeper, I searched it. It's still for sale. Been sitting for months. No serious offers. I found the broker's number. Wrote it down on a yellow notepad. Let the pen linger on the paper. Then I leaned back, sipped the last of my cold coffee, and smiled. If they won't let me sit at their table, I'll just buy the damn table. Wednesday night. The house smelled like rosemary and garlic. Evelyn was in a full apron, plating lamb chops and couscous as if Gordon Ramsay himself was coming over. I already knew why. Lauren was dropping by, one of those friends who smiled too much and meant none of it. I set the table without being asked. She didn't thank me, just handed me the silverware roll like I was staff. Lauren breezed in 20 minutes late, wearing some perfume that stuck to the walls. She kissed both of us on the cheek. Me last, like an afterthought. As we sat down, Lauren raised her glass and said, "Evelyn, your taste is always so impeccable, even in men." They both laughed. I smiled, nodded like I'd heard a compliment. Inside, something flinched. Lauren turned to me with a wink. "So well behaved. You've trained him well." Evelyn didn't flinch, didn't counter, just reached for the salt and passed it along like we were all in on the joke. I laughed too, quietly. Then checked my phone and excused myself. "Work email," I lied. I walked out back, closed the door gently, sat on the porch swing and stared out at the yard that never felt like mine. That wasn't the first dinner like that. Probably wouldn't be the last. But something had changed. I wasn't just tolerating anymore. I was clocking it, storing it. As the breeze picked up, I remembered one of our first real fights. It was during an anniversary party. I'd made a joke, nothing crude, just blunt, and she pulled me aside after, all tight smile and low voice. "You're too blunt for my circles," she'd said. "People like elegance, not edge." So I toned it down, stopped interrupting her friends with facts, let them finish their stories no matter how wrong they were, let her order for me sometimes, switched out whiskey for wine, let go of my poker nights, shaved off my beard. One choice at a time, and suddenly, I was someone else. You don't lose your voice all at once. It slips away in silences you accept. I stood up, needed to walk, grabbed a hoodie and headed toward the park a few blocks down. Near the duck pond, I saw him. Clay, retired Army, mid-70s, built like a truck. We'd nodded at each other before. Tonight, he waved me over. "You walk like a man who's learning how not to apologize for existing," he said without even looking at me. I chuckled. "That obvious?" He leaned back on the bench. "You'd be surprised how many guys do that. Start with a sharp jaw and end up being decorative, an ornament in their own damn house." I didn't respond. "It's hell being polite when you're screaming inside, huh?" I looked at him. He was staring straight ahead, not accusing, just seeing. He pulled out a flask, took a sip, then offered it. I shook my head. Clay sighed. "Just don't wait till you're too old to remember your own voice." We didn't say goodbye, just sat for a bit. Then I walked home. Evelyn was upstairs, probably on a call or watching her show. The kitchen light buzzed faintly. I didn't head up. Instead, I walked to the closet. This time, I wasn't looking at the space she'd carved out for me. I was looking at what was missing. Then I saw it, tucked behind a row of blazers, my old brown canvas jacket. The one she once said made me look too rugged. I pulled it off the hanger and slid it on. Still fit, still felt like mine. Sat down at the desk, opened my laptop, pulled up the listing for the club again, ran some numbers, did the math twice. I had enough, more than enough. She never asked about my side accounts, never wondered why I still handled our taxes myself. Clicked on the broker's number, left a message to schedule an in-person visit. I leaned back, fingers laced behind my head, jacket still on. The house was quiet. I used to think keeping the peace meant keeping quiet, but peace doesn't mean pretending. I came home around 2, grocery bags in hand, still smelled faintly of the hardware store. Walked through the front door, set everything down on the kitchen island. I heard her upstairs, closet doors creaking, hangers sliding. Evelyn was trying on dresses again, probably for that gala next week. I didn't ask. A few minutes later, she called out from the bedroom. "Can you come up a sec?" She was standing in front of the mirror, 2 dresses draped across the bed. One emerald, one black with a low back. She turned slightly, holding the green one against her. "Which looks more elegant to you?" It wasn't a real question. I'd never been invited into this process before. Now suddenly my opinion mattered. I stared a second too long. "The green one, I guess." She didn't nod, just looked at herself again and muttered, "I thought so too. You always go safe." That one hit just below the ribs. I didn't argue, just left her to it. Downstairs I put away the groceries, 1 can at a time. My hands moved, but my head wasn't in the kitchen anymore. That dress wasn't about dresses. It was about something else, something older, maybe deeper, and I could feel it coming. Half an hour later, she came down with her bag over her shoulder. "We're heading to Klein's. Marlo wants to look at new pieces for the spring event. You're coming." She didn't ask, just assumed. I grabbed my keys. Klein's wasn't a place I belonged. It had wood-paneled walls and white marble floors and a smell that whispered, "Don't touch anything." The mannequins looked like they'd been flown in from Milan. Marlo met us inside wearing sunglasses indoors. She gave me the kind of smile people give golden retrievers. Evelyn and Marlo picked out dresses, then coats, then jewelry. The saleswoman fluttered around them, complimenting Evelyn's taste, Marlo's skin tone, never once asking if I needed anything. Once Evelyn picked up a navy blazer and held it out to me. "It's not your style," she said, "but wouldn't this clean up nice?" I stood there like a coat rack. nodded, said nothing. Then she wandered off for a phone call. "Just 1 sec," she mouthed. I leaned near the curtain and heard her say, "Yes, under my account. As usual. He won't need to see the receipt." That was the moment. Not a scream, not a slap. Just that. As usual. I looked at myself in the mirror near the exit. Pale blue button-down, beige slacks. Everything hand-picked by her. I blended in like wallpaper. In the car on the way back, she was humming. I stared at my reflection in the rearview mirror. No beard, no voice, just the man she edited. I remembered how I used to talk. Before I muted myself, before I started swapping jokes for silence, leather jackets for polos, pool tables for canapes. I wasn't being supported. I was being rewritten. Elegance isn't tailoring. It's honesty. Back at the boutique, just before we left, a young man at the counter handed Evelyn the bag and said, "Madam, he looks nice for tonight's event." She smiled like it was her win. I swallowed that moment. Not the words, just the tone, that damn qualifier. For tonight's event, not generally, not as a man, just as a +1 with polished shoes. She thanked him, didn't look at me. That drive home felt longer than it was. She kept talking about floral centerpieces and color palettes. I just watched the road. When we walked in, she placed a small white envelope on the dining table. "This came," she said. "Black tie mandatory." I picked it up, turned it over. The embossed logo of the club she worshipped sat front and center. A place I'd fixed the HVAC for years ago. They never remembered my name, but now they had me on a guest list. Or rather, she did. I looked at the invitation again. Read the date, the theme. Then I set it down slowly. She turned and walked to the kitchen, flipping through her mail like nothing had just been handed to me but an invisible leash. I wasn't mad. Not anymore. I was thinking, if they'll invite me to sit at their table, I'll bring my own chair. I closed my laptop softly, watching the last chart fade. The afternoon light slanted through curtains in my home office. I'd swallowed dinner hours ago. Now I sat alone, maps of ledgers and club records spread across the table. I remembered the night I first saw the club for sale sign, dusty letters on a fading marquee. I told myself then, if I never try, I remain the outsider forever. I pulled out my phone and dialed a broker's number under an alias, voice calm, businesslike. He said they'd give me a private viewing tomorrow afternoon. I drafted a plan. Acquire the property through a holding company, shield my identity from Evelyn and the club board. I wrote down the steps. Escrow, legal structuring, controlling shares. Everything needed to be airtight. I let optimism settle over me like a tent, protective but fragile. Later, I arrived at the club under the cover of dusk. At a back entrance, a small private meeting was gathering. I entered as a minor investor, carrying my briefcase, behaving like someone with modest interest. Board members nodded, eyes polite, lips measuring. I opened my proposal, a subtle renovation plan, new landscaping, membership incentives. I spoke quietly, letting conviction do the heavy lifting. One board member, a man named Harris, leaned forward. "We've seen many proposals. Yours is different." A murmur followed. And then I dropped the bomb. I revealed my hidden majority share. I showed documents no one expected, the shares I acquired weeks earlier transferred quietly. The room went still, like the air had stiffened. Faces masked shock, some flicked glances at each other. The power shifted without a fight. Afterward, I headed down a corridor. My phone buzzed. A text from Evelyn. "Be careful. Don't overreach." The walls felt narrower. I overheard Emmerich pressing a board member. He didn't disclose everything. They questioned legitimacy, thumbed through my documentation. And then came the real slap. My name wasn't on the official meeting list, even though I was the major shareholder. I stood firm. I asked them for a copy. They hesitated. They hemmed. Their silence stretched longer than any argument could. I retreated to my car in the lot. Night air filled my lungs. I reviewed my smuggled agenda notes, legal clauses, public leaks I could use. I called Breyer and asked him to be ready. Quiet media outreach, a public statement. I rehearsed one. "I'm not here to dismantle this club. I'm here to restore its legacy." And then decided I would arrive at the gala as a member, not a guest. I would stand, not sit. My phone dinged. Gentry Sloan's email. Your proposal will go to vote. My pulse leaped. That was it. That was the moment. I sat back in my car, fingers clasped on the steering wheel. All those subtle slights, every photo where I was cropped, every moment I swallowed a word, they fueled this. I whispered into the dark, if they won't seat me, I'll become the seat. Tomorrow they must vote, and I'll show them I already rule. I showed up early, not by accident, not to kill time, but because I needed to feel the air before it thickened. The club's meeting hall smelled faintly of polished oak and politics. I told them I came to oversee logistics. No one questioned it. The lighting was warm, calculated to relax donors and disarm dissent. The board members filtered in, their smiles slow and seasoned. I stood near the entrance, far from the center table, invisible yet observing. They remembered last week, that meeting where my hidden shares surfaced, the way they looked around the room like someone had rearranged the furniture and not told them. I kept that image in my mind. Tonight wasn't about surprise, it was about ownership. Through the hallway's narrow corridor, I heard hushed voices that slowed my step. He seems confident now, Delora's voice murmured. Then came Emmerich's. He's bluffing, all posture. Delora laughed, low, knowing, cold. He's still a man with secrets. And men with secrets don't last long here. I didn't move. I didn't blink. They weren't whispering about a rival. They were talking about their accessory, something they thought they'd discarded. And yet, I'd become the subject of their worry. Funny how that works. They don't see me, but they fear me. That contrast, that's power. I walked past them without looking their way, out onto the veranda where the lawn stretched black under moonlight and the golf course faded into silence. The air smelled like cut grass and tension. I thought about the years of being called not polished enough, the subtle edits to our photos, the accidental omissions in club newsletters. I stood there, breathing in my own name, not hers, mine. I pulled out my phone and texted Breyer 2 words, "Be ready." Then I turned back. Inside, music played low over the clinking of dessert forks. Guests chatted, unaware, or pretending to be. I walked straight to Delora. She didn't see me at first. But when I stood beside her table, the chatter quieted. "If you think I'm a mystery," I said softly, "you're about to learn my name." She blinked. "Excuse me?" I took off my jacket, the same green one she once told me made me look like I was auditioning for the wrong part. Marlowe froze with her spoon mid-air. Someone coughed. Chairs creaked as heads turned. Then I walked past them. To the board table. I didn't wait for ceremony. I looked at the chairperson. "I'd like to request a vote tonight, not on my proposal, on leadership." Gentry Sloan adjusted his glasses. "That's highly irregular, but not illegal." He looked around. People shifted in their seats. One by one, they grew quiet. I didn't yell. I didn't posture. I stood still, like someone who belonged in that room all along. The chair rose slowly. Then we proceed. Roll call. A hush swept over the hall. Even the forks stopped. I looked over at Delora. She smiled, but it faltered halfway, like her face forgot how to finish the gesture. They called my name. I didn't answer right away. I just stood there, letting it ring in the air. Because tonight, when they saw me stand, some would applaud, others would weep. The boardroom smelled of polished wood and heavy expectation. As I walked in, members trickled through the doors, some whispering as I passed, eyebrows dipped, tension trailing. Breyer stood near the back, nodding once. Silent support. My pulse settled into a steady thrum. Tonight was the reckoning. When the chair called the meeting to order and read the agenda, a hush fell. I listened to the list of scheduled motions, but my mind ran ahead, counting names, weighing alliances. I cleared my throat and began recounting every step I'd taken to legitimate my stake. The escrow, the corporate shell, the legal vetting. I spoke quietly, deliberately, with no flourish. The room leaned in. My heart pounded, but I held it steady. Coiled anticipation, restrained pride. Just as I opened my mouth to transition to my next point, Gentry Sloan rose and pressed play. The hall fell into silence. A recording of Delora's voice, mocking, condescending, echoed over the speakers. It was Fernie's recording, uncut. Delora's laughter wavered when the words rang clear. Faces shifted. Gasps rippled. My breath caught. I said nothing for a moment, letting the weight hang in the air. Then, soft. This is what they call elegant? My own voice felt unfamiliar, powerful. As eyes still spun, I turned toward Bishop Klein. I asked him to bring forward the original contract, signed by me. Documents appeared. I revealed Twist S17, the contract that Emmerich and Lennox had secretly placed in Lennox's name, hidden from everyone. Board members murmured in disbelief. How had they missed it? How had they conspired? Delora rose to interrupt, but I held up my hand. I said, I always owned it. You just prevented me from using it. Silence burst in the hall. Power reversed with a single stroke of truth. In that stunned quiet, alliances shifted. Some board members approached, cautious respect in their eyes. Delora sank back into her seat, speechless. I felt a pulse of relief more than triumph. Memories flickered, her cropping me from photos, erasing my name from memos, rewriting narratives. I exhaled, letting it go. They can't erase me now, I thought. Then the chair, voice shaking, announced, We will now vote on a motion to confirm Mr. Harlan as co-chairman. Ballot slips passed out. Murmurs exploded in low undertones. Yes, no, abstain. My eyes flicked to Delora. She looked away. I gripped the podium, legs steady, body rooted. The room held its breath. They vote in 5 minutes, and tonight I claim my seat. 1 week passed. The air in the club was still thick with shifts, subtle but real. The old brass nameplates on the boardroom chairs had been replaced. Mine now read chair. Delora's was gone entirely, just a blank space where her presence used to loom. She was on sabbatical, per the polite announcement, but everyone knew better. After the meeting, Gentry Sloan lingered. He didn't say much, just looked me in the eye and nodded once. You earned it, he muttered. I nodded back. No grand gestures, just quiet recognition. Breyer and I sat in the lounge afterward, sipping tea. Not champagne, not whiskey, tea. He smiled without showing teeth. You moved quiet, but you moved right. I looked around that room, the one I'd once been asked to leave when I wasn't appropriately dressed. I had those velvet ropes removed the same morning after the vote. Let people walk through, let them see what's possible. There was peace and control, not the noisy kind. The calm, grounded kind that came from knowing I'd outgrown what used to shrink me. Later that day I came home. The house felt empty in a way that wasn't sad, just hollowed out, like something had been scooped clean. Delora stood at the center of the living room, suitcase open, hands shaking just enough to betray what she wouldn't say out loud. You made your point, she said. Now what? I stood there for a long second. No anger, no triumph, just truth. Now I live, and you learn. I handed her the manila envelope, divorce papers neatly signed, but also a note. She kept the house. That surprised her. But there was a clause, a public apology, one she'd write, one she'd sign. You always liked appearances, I said quietly. Now wear one that fits. There was no argument, just her eyes flashing something halfway between fury and regret, and me turning toward the door, finally done performing silence. A few days later, the local news aired a story called Power Shifts in Country Clubs, The Fall of Elegance. I watched from my kitchen. My voice played over footage of the vote. Elegance isn't money, it's dignity under fire. Then Delora came on screen. Her apology was brief, measured. You could tell it burned to say it, but she said it. That was enough. Online, the comments split down every line. Some saw a feminist arc, others a scandal. One anchor asked if this was a morality tale. I answered during a later interview, it's not about men or women, it's about people, about not letting someone else write your name in pencil. Days melted into a new rhythm. I'd bought a smaller house, a cottage really, just a short drive from the club, but a world away in feel. It had a back garden, nothing fancy, but it was mine. Every morning, I'd walk the path, coffee in hand, and let the quiet teach me how to breathe again. One morning, I stopped under the oak tree, same one I'd passed a dozen times. I thought back to a night years ago, dinner with Delora's friends. I was in a cheap suit. She leaned in and whispered, "You don't belong here." I smiled at the memory, but not bitterly, just with perspective, because now I could say, out loud or not, I always did. You just didn't see it. The truth is, I never needed to own their club. I just needed to own myself. And now I did. They called it revenge. They called it strategy. But for me, it was restoration, a way back to who I was before I bent to fit their picture frames. And if you think this is where it ends, well, I just got started.